Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today I got some super exciting news. I modded this Arcade1Up and the mod has become even easier than it was before. So this is the easiest possible method on how to mod any Arcade1Up, and it is seamless. It looks 100% authentic and original and factory. I mean, you could still do any other mod you want to this, but you have all the games here. It's super easy. You don't even need to drill anymore. What's happening is the guys at Showtime asked me to make this video. They're now selling these panels right here that come pre-drilled. So you don't have to worry about drilling into the control panel or even the plexiglass. You just take this panel out. It's so easy. I'll show you guys how I did it. This is such an easy and fast mod to do. It is very good. It plays off a Raspberry Pi 4 or 5 or a mini PC. You get to choose what you want. The collections of games is amazing. You got pretty much everything you could think of. You got it all. You got light gun games, you got arcade games, you got it all. You got everything up to like Dreamcast, PS1, things of that nature. It is awesome. It looks so cool. The marquee lights up. Everything is super plug and play. I'm going to show you guys how I did it without even having to drill. The whole mod probably took me, without exaggerating, maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. That's how easy it is to do now, guys, because there's no more drilling involved. It's super easy. You guys will love it. So I'll show you guys how I did it. So I hope you guys enjoy the video and wait till the very end, and I will show you guys exactly what the interface looks like and how to operate it. It's very, very, very easy. No need for anything extra. It is awesome. It is a super cheap way to do it too, without having to spend a lot of money and buying new control decks. It is awesome, guys. I hope you guys enjoy it and watch the video and let me know, or let them know, if you guys need anything. And I'm sure they will respond to you guys. So just leave a comment below, and I'm sure they'll get to it. Okay? They're very responsive in everything they do. So thank you.
All right, so to begin, we're going to take the control panel off, and in order to do that, we have to take these 4 screws off, which I've already unloosened right here. So now we're going to pull the control deck off. But when we pull the control deck off, we've got to be real careful here because it's still connected. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and unplug the ribbon cable, just like that. Sometimes you might have a second cable, so unplug both of them, and then let the control deck out. So for the next step, we're going to go ahead and remove the joystick bat tops. Just so you guys understand, this did not come with dust covers. This was picked up as a used arcade. So just go ahead and remove those. I don't have the dust covers, but if you did, you would take them out. You flip it over, and we're going to take out these screws right here. There should be 4 on top right there and right there. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those, and I'll take this panel off. Now that I took the screws off, I'm going to go ahead and remove this panel. It can be glued, so be careful. It's really stuck. So we put that to the side. Now we have all the buttons, joysticks, and the encoder. So first things first, what we want to do is we want to unplug the encoder. But what's important is you want to find the power and the volume button right here. These two right here. We got to trace them and unplug them carefully. It'll even tell you power and volume, but either way, let's go ahead and remove all these. I'm going to go ahead and remove all these from the encoder board, and then remove the encoder board with the 3 screws right there. 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes you'll only have 2 screws, but I'm going to go ahead and unplug that and then remove the encoder board. Okay, now that I have the encoder removed, it was as simple as removing the 3 screws, and it just comes right off. I was able to save these. These 2 are very important, more so the volume switch, because we will be using this. So save that as it looks like, just like that. You're gonna have to pull it straight out of the encoder board, and we're gonna use this, okay? So as far as these other buttons, we're just gonna cut all the wires, and to remove the buttons, you gotta press the tabs on both sides and push through, and that's how you get all the buttons out. So, and to remove the joysticks, it's so easy, guys. Just go ahead,
and take the screws off. We will reuse these screws because we will put new joysticks, but it's just a screwdriver or a drill, guys. So it's super easy. Anybody could do this. You may or may not have glue attached to some of this stuff. If you do have glue, just try to wiggle it off. And I'll show you, this one may or may not have glue. But yeah, so this one's still tight. So what I would do is I would go on this side and just pop it out with like a little hammer or something, because sometimes the glue is a little you know, makes it stuck to the board, obviously, and it could be a little tight. But yeah, that's how you remove the joystick, and that's how you remove the buttons. I'm gonna clear all this and move on to the next step. So this is what the control deck looks like now that I removed the buttons and the joysticks. Keep in mind, guys, this has only taken me just a couple minutes. I mean, this whole process is super simple. It doesn't take long at all. But that's the control board. I opened up the package with all the controls. It's got the buttons, the joysticks, the encoders. Do not be intimidated. It looks so much more intimidating than it is. All you gotta do is just choose whatever color you want. You can mix and match your buttons, it doesn't matter. You drop in a button to whatever slot you like, and you flip it over, and you pretty much do that to attach the buttons. So my goal is to put the blue on this side and red on this side. You can mix and match, do whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm gonna drop in all the buttons, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I dropped all the buttons in just like that. Now I do have my starts in, and I chose the same color. You can choose these guys because you do get 2 extra buttons of each. So I'm gonna use the same color instead of these, but you can mix and match. Sometimes I go with these, sometimes I go with the colors. But now that the buttons are in, you flip it over to the back, and it's as easy as putting the new joystick with this white part facing down. It has to face down on both of them. And we're gonna use the original screws that we took out of the original joystick and put the screws back in to mount this into place. I'm gonna put both joysticks in, and we'll move on to the next part. Now for the next part, we're gonna go ahead and cut these off. Be careful with these because they're zip tied very tight. These are the 2 5 pins. You get one for each joystick. We plug it in right here, okay, into the joystick. The other one right here. All right. Now this part is very important, but please do not be intimidated. It is super easy, but you just have to do it the right way. And I will show you the right way. You cannot mess this part up because you got to do it in a specific order, and I'll show you how to do it. So you have 1 encoder for player 1, 1 encoder for player 2, right? So these cables that you get for all the buttons, you just rip them off, right? And you get a bunch of 3-pin cables like this. So now what's very important is that you wire it this way. You have, well, I want you to look at it this way, right? If that's button 1, this right here will be slot 1. If that's button 2, that's slot 2, and so on and so forth. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, without skipping any. So they have to be done the same exact way for both player 1 and player 2, meaning that button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will plug into their respective slots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go ahead and do what I'm doing right now. I'm not gonna cut any part out here. I'm just gonna go ahead and plug these in so you guys know what I'm talking about. So the first slot went to player 1, which means the second slot needs to go to player 2, just like this. So I want you guys to pay attention to that. Start will plug into a different slot. I'll show you guys that in a bit. Okay, so just like this. This whole process takes just a few minutes. I mean, it's so easy to mod these arcades nowadays, especially with this system. Anybody can do it, and I stress that a lot because it's so true. I mean, it looks intimidating, but it's really nothing crazy at all. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and plug in button 5 to slot 5. Okay, that goes there. I hope you guys can see that. And then button 6 will plug into slot 6.
Okay, so this will plug in here. Okay, and then this joystick, this 5-pin, will plug in right there. Okay, so the joystick will plug in right here. I hope you guys can see what I'm doing. And it should look just like that. Now, I want you guys to see the start button is gonna plug into a different slot. I'm gonna, you know, I went 1 through 6 without skipping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The joystick right there. Okay, and then the start button, if you flip the encoder over, you'll see ST and SE. ST is start, SE is select. So this start button, we're gonna go ahead and plug that into ST. That goes there. And third from the bottom, where it says ST, that is start. Now we don't have SE on this control board, but we're gonna go ahead and plug an extra cable in into select, which is the one right above start. So it should look like that. You get 6 plugged in, and then 2 spaced up, and then start and select in the next 2. I'm gonna wire this exactly the same way, in the same order. So this will be done the same way this was done. I stress that a lot because it's important, right? The joystick will plug there. Player 1 will plug there. Player 2 will plug in the second slot. 3 in the third slot, and so on and so forth. The start button will plug in to ST, which is third from the bottom. And then just keep in mind, guys, we still have this guy for select, which we will plug in later, and I'll get to that in the next portion of the video. Okay, so now I got player 1 and player 2 wired the same exact way, but just as a reminder, I don't have select on this control board. It is on the J panel. Sometimes, you know, I drill into this, or you know, whatever. I'll have it on the control board, but yeah, I have select hanging for both player 1 and player 2. We will plug these in later. We do have a bunch of extra cables. You could toss those or keep them for later. It really doesn't matter. So now that everything is done, we're gonna take this cable right here. You got 2 of these, one for each player. This end will plug in to the encoder. So we'll plug that in, just like that. And this end, which is the same, will plug into the encoder. However, the opposite end of that is a USB. So you got a USB for player 1 and a USB for player 2. These will plug in to the Raspberry Pi. This will be player 1, this will be player 2 for the Raspberry Pi, and we are done with the control deck for now. So I'm gonna move on to the next portion of the video and we'll go from there.
Okay, so for the next portion of the video, this is just a simple method because we're not drilling. Your package can come with this, or you could buy this separately. This is a replacement for this panel right here. There are some grooves that it goes inside of. So all you have to do is remove this, just pull it out and replace it with this. Then we'll add the select buttons for these, for player 1 and player 2, and we'll go from there. If this is a little tight and you can't get it out, you can remove some of the screws on the side just to loosen it up and it'll pop right out. But other than that, it's relatively easy. So we're gonna swap this panel with this panel. I just cannot do it with one hand. So I'm gonna stop the video and swap it out. So before I put the panel in, I obviously put the buttons in just like that. This is the old panel, and I dropped that in. It's super simple. Took me just a few seconds. This is the control board that we've already modded. We're just gonna go ahead and drop this in. Now when I drop this in, before I do that, I still have a select. See that cable right there? I'll zoom in right there. So that cable needs to plug into player 1 button. That's the select. And then I have one for player 2 as well. So they will plug in to their respective slots. And then I will put the control board in. I'm just doing this one hand. I have no help today. So once that is in, I'll put that in and then I'll show you what it looks like. But I will plug in the select button right here into that slot, and then I'll connect everything together. Okay, so this is what it looks like, guys. I plugged in the select into that extra cable that was hanging from the encoder board for both player 1 and 2. It looks awesome. It is so seamless. No need for drilling. It looks beautiful. There's just a couple things to note. This was purchased used offline, and it didn't have the plexiglass. Even if it did have the plexiglass, you wouldn't have to make no adjustments to the plexiglass. There's still no drilling. This just doesn't have it. It didn't come with it. It didn't come with dust covers. But luckily, the control package, when we get this, the new joysticks, they come with new dust covers. I put the original screws back into their original place, and it looks awesome. So it is super, super seamless. It is very, very pretty. And we're done with this portion. We're gonna go to the back, and now we're gonna open up the arcade and then mod the rest of it from the inside. This is the hard part, and this whole process, I mean, even without recording, I mean, if I weren't to be recording, this whole process takes no more than 10, 15 minutes max. Even if you're not familiar with it, all you have to do is follow step by step, and it works every time. Do not be intimidated. It is very, very easy. And now we don't even have to drill. I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful mod. And you guys will see the end result. And I hope you guys love it. Okay, so for the next step, it seems like this guy got it on backwards. The sticker should always be on the inside. But regardless, I'm going to go ahead and remove 1, 2, and 3 screws. And I will pull this down and we'll go on the inside. Okay, I removed the 3 screws with a screwdriver. And if you have a cable like this hanging out, just push it through. It's fine. And then we're gonna take this off and open it. And now you can see player 1 and player 2, the encoder boards, and the USBs that we need to plug in to the Raspberry Pi. This is the original PCB. We will remove this. This won't be needed. So we're just gonna go ahead and unplug everything. That's a little tight, that one. But this was the cable that came out of the back panel. We don't need that. We can put that to the side. This is for the speaker right here, and this is for the marquee. Sometimes you'll have tape and stuff like that. So now I got everything disconnected from the PCB. I'm gonna take a screwdriver and remove this screw and this screw. Sometimes you'll have more screws, but no biggie. We will just go ahead and drop that and remove it and move on to the next step. Okay, so now that I removed the 2 screws on the PCB, you can flip it around and it should look something like this. So this right here is the ground wire. It's attached to the back of the monitor. Sometimes it'll be attached inside onto the PCB. So sometimes you may find it attached in a corner. Either way, we're gonna go ahead and disconnect that ground wire. All right, once we disconnect that, we're gonna disconnect this cable and that cable from the back of the monitor, and this PCB will come out. If it's a little tight or if there's a little glue, just jiggle left and right and just remove these. It's very, very straightforward. So a few seconds later, I removed the PCB. It only took me a couple seconds. I took out the ground from the back of the monitor and unplugged this, and I'm gonna put the PCB to the side, and this is what it looks like. Now, this part is very important, but very easy. All you have to do in order to order the proper parts is make sure that you are using the proper HDMI converter. And in order to get that, you need to see what model number monitor you have. So in this case, you open it up and look back here. This one's the DV170 YGZ-N10. It's a BOE monitor. So if you want to submit that, you have to submit what monitor you're using, so you get the proper HDMI converter, and which that will attach to these cables. So that's one thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do is let them know. In this case, you have the speakers up by the marquee, right? The speakers are up there. Let them know that you have a headphone jack and that the speakers are up by the marquee, because sometimes the speakers can be inside of the control board, which are like the original Gen 1, Gen 2 models. That's not the case here. These are up, and maybe I should go back. These speakers are up here by the marquee. So let them know that you have the headphone jack right there, and that you are using, you are using an Arcade that has the speakers up by the marquee and not in the control board. So you also get the right parts for that. Okay, so before I move on to the next step, what I did was I put a piece of cardboard right there. I kind of recommend this just because you don't want the HDMI converter that we're about to touch the actual metal. So I put a piece of cardboard to protect in between. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove this right here, and we won't need this little board that's connected to it. So this right here, right there, will plug in right here, and then this 30-pin cable will plug in right there. And then there's that ground. That ground, I already have a screw here, so I'm going to take that screw in that nut, and I'm going to put the ground terminal right there in that corner, and I'll show you guys how I did it. Okay, so I went ahead and plugged everything in. So this little terminal right here, with the little nut right there and the screw, I plugged it into the top left of the HDMI converter. So that's the ground wire. I recommend putting it here. I just screwed this on with my hand and I hand tightened it. It's that easy, guys. This plugged right in here. It's plug and play. It only plugs in one way. And this plugged in right up here. Keep in mind, whatever was plugged in here, I have unplugged it. That was this thing right here. We're gonna toss this in the trash. We won't use it. Okay, so this part right here, this is important. You see the red cables, how it has red cables? Those gotta be facing to the left. See, there's a white dot right there. White dot to the left, red cables to the left. It has to be plugged in like that. Now you can plug it in both ways, but if the red cables are not to the left, then it won't work. So it has to be plugged in just like you see it here. Red cables to the left, okay? This only plugs in one way, and that terminal, I screwed it on by hand. It's so simple. Don't be intimidated. That's all it is, guys. And then we'll move on to the next few steps. Okay, so now we still have these cables hanging. One's for the speakers, and one is for the marquee that lights up top. We'll just put them to the side for now. We'll get to that later. Let's just go ahead and plug in our HDMI. There's an HDMI to micro HDMI. So I'll just go ahead and plug the HDMI right here, just like that. And I will move on to the next step. So you get a Raspberry Pi and the power supply for it. You get an SD card, which I've already opened. You get a pack with all the specialty cables that make it plug and play. And then you get the power strip. So this right here is the original power supply. This is what, before I started to mod, this was what I used to plug in the wall just to play the normal Street Fighter before the mod. So this is made by Arcade1Up. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it inside, and I will show you how all these specialty cables plug in. It is super easy, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this original Arcade1Up power supply, I plugged into this this specialty cable. Plugs in right there. Now the marquee that's hanging from the top will plug in, that cable will plug in to that slot right there, and this will plug in to the HDMI converter. That goes to the HDMI converter, that goes to the marquee, and it looks just like that. I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in and show you what it looks like. So the long end plugged into the marquee cable. So I plugged that in right there, it just plugs right in there. And the shorter end plugs into the HDMI converter right there. So, and then the original Arcade1Up power supply is right here. And then I have the cable, which I will plug into the power strip later. So that's very straightforward. This is the original Arcade1Up power supply. It plugged into this cable right here. And then that goes off, that splits off into the marquee. And then the short end goes into the HDMI converter. Super plug and play, hard to mess up. The next cable will look just like this. So the speakers that come from the top, you plug it into this barrel right here, and the other end, this end right here, will plug in right there. And I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. Another super plug and play 2-second cable to plug in. Okay, so this is what it looked like. That cable that comes from the top. This is that headphone jack for the speakers. You plug it into there, and you follow that up, and that plugs in there. It's super easy. Took 2 seconds. Then you have another cable I plugged in right there where we removed the original one. So this is another specialty cable. This goes from there, the 10 pin. There's only one way to plug it in, and that goes all the way to the control board. Now this is the volume switch where you control the volume. This connects to that cable that we saved earlier when we disassembled the encoder from the control deck. So this plugged right in there. So it goes from there, this cable goes from there, straight to there. Super easy. This takes literally seconds, guys. So nothing to be intimidated about. It's all plug and play, and you really can't mess it up. The most important thing is just to remember that the red cable's to the left, everything else plugs in one way. Okay, so now we got the HDMI plugged in. The other end is the micro HDMI. So this end will plug into the Raspberry Pi, and I'll show you what that looks like. But guys, do not be intimidated. This is all the same. All these arcades are exactly done the same way. The only difference is you have to get the right HDMI converter. They all look the same, so they'll all be wired the same, depending on the monitor, model number of the monitor. And then Gen 1 and Gen 2, they had the speaker in the control deck, so you'll see the speaker here. The only difference is instead of it being up there, you'll have a different connector, but you'll still wire it the same way. That will go from there to the speaker there. That's the only difference, but this connector will be different when you order the right kit, okay? So I opened up the Raspberry Pi, and this is the power supply to the Raspberry Pi. They come separate. So this SD card, if you flip it to the bottom, you got to plug it in like that. It goes inside of there, and so if I grab the Raspberry Pi, you'll notice that the USB-C power supply is plugged in the bottom left, right there. You have the option of upgrading to a Raspberry Pi 5 even, or even a mini PC, okay? So, but they're all more or less the same. So because this is the Raspberry Pi 4, the micro HDMI that's connected to the back of the monitor will plug in there. The Pi 4 is player specific. So player 1 is in the top right, player 2 in the bottom right, and then 3 up here, and then 4 down here, okay? So we're gonna plug player 1 in the top right, player 2 down here, okay? On the Raspberry Pi 5, it's switched up. The Raspberry Pi 5, you'll have player 1 up here and player 2 down here. So just something to be alert of. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so the mod is actually fully complete now. We got the HDMI going from HDMI there, and from HDMI there, and then it goes down to the Raspberry Pi, plugs in right there via micro HDMI. So you got the power supply, the micro HDMI. Now I got player 1 and player 2 from the joysticks plugged into their respective slots. I got the SD card there, and we are fully done. One thing I'm not doing, guys, is I am not gonna show you guys the cable management, how to clean this up. I will clean this up later. But I do recommend one thing, guys, is to put a case or a fan on this Raspberry Pi, because they can get hot, and it's not required, but I do recommend it. It is a strong recommendation just to keep the Raspberry Pi nice and cool. So the cables, all the specialty cables are plug and play. This whole thing was so easy. So this is the original Arcade1Up power supply. I just mounted it right there. You don't have to, it could go anywhere inside. That plugs into that specialty cable, and that specialty cable splits off into the marquee, and then splits off by being plugged into there. We will have 2 of these cables. One's for the Raspberry Pi, and the other is for, this is the original Arcade1Up power supply. This is pretty much to power up everything else. So I will show you guys what to do next, and how to go from there. Okay, so all I did right now was put the original cover back on, and I put the 3 screws on. I also took a little bit of a little knife, and I cut a little edge, cut the little corner right there, just to fish these 2 cables out. You don't have to do that. You can poke them through the holes, whatever you'd like. And what I like to do is this comes like this. So you just take off the double-sided sticky tape, and you can just stick it right there, somewhere right there, and press on it firmly. And that's it, guys. The mod is done. This will plug into the wall, and the Raspberry Pi will plug right anywhere in here. The original Arcade1Up power supply, plug in anywhere here. I'll clean these cables out, fish them back inside, just to make it look nice and clean. And then I will plug this into the wall, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Okay, so now it's nice and sleek, and this is all hidden. This plugs into the wall, and you just flip the switch right here, and it powers everything up. So as you can see, everything so far is looking good. So there's gonna be a few things you wanna do right when you finish the installation, and I'll get to that. So first things first, marquee lights up. All the buttons are lighting up. That's a good sign. Now you wanna check the audio right here to see if the switch is working. So yes, that's good. And that's really responsive. So that's working very well. Okay, so the first things first is you wanna map the controls accordingly. All right, so step one is once you turn it on, you'll be right here in the main menu. And this is what it looks like. So before we go any further, we're gonna hit the start button. It opens up the menu. You go to controller and Bluetooth settings. We're gonna hit this button right here because that's programmed right now as the action key. So you wanna go to controller mapping, which is the top option. Hit the action key again, which is that. It's gonna ask you, sure, you hit okay. Now it's gonna say press and hold a button. Now it's detecting 3 game pads. This player 1, player 2, and I have a USB dongle plugged in for a wireless controller. So to map it, you wanna press and hold any of these buttons, and this comes up. So it's gonna say south, and once I push a button and choose that as south, it'll naturally move down to the next row. So this will be south, this will be east, north will be up here, west will be right here, start will be right there, select right here. Now it's gonna say D-pad up, D-pad down, D-pad left, D-pad right. Left shoulder will be right here, right shoulder will be right there. And then now I don't have any more buttons on this right here. So I'm gonna use player 2 and scroll all the way down to hotkey. Now this is very important. I must assign hotkey as my select. So now I'm done with that. So I'm gonna hit okay. And now it still hasn't mapped, not even player 1. I need to do that 2 times. So controller mapping, this is still my action key. Okay, okay. And then now it's gonna ask me to press and hold a button. So I'm gonna do it all over again. That's south, east, north, west, start, select, up, down, left, right, left shoulder, right shoulder. Use player 2 to scroll all the way down to hotkey and then hit select. Now it's mapped properly. So now this will be my action, this will be my back, and this will be search for everything in the main menu. So now I wanna map player 2. So in order to do that, I'm gonna go back to controller mapping and select this by pushing the action button. So now that's mapped properly. So now it's gonna ask you that. You just hit okay by hitting the action button. Now you go over to gamepad 2 and you press and hold a button. Now we're gonna map it the same way. So that's gonna go south, east, north, west, start, select, D-pad up, D-pad down, D-pad left, D-pad right, left shoulder, right shoulder. Gonna go to player 1 to scroll all the way down to hotkey, and that will be select. And then it's gonna ask you to push okay. You push okay. You only have to do that once for player 2, 3, or 4, okay? You just have to do player 1 twice. So now that we got that out of the way, I'm gonna grab this guy right here because I have him plugged in. And let me see. So most of it should be mapped, but it's not mapped properly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and hit start. I'll go to controller and Bluetooth settings, hit the action button, controller mapping, hit the action button, press OK by hitting the action button. Now it's gonna ask me to press and hold the button here. So we're gonna do that. Same rules apply. That's gonna be south, east, north, west, start, select, D-pad up, D-pad down, D-pad left, D-pad right, left shoulder, right shoulder. Now it's gonna ask for analog, a left analog up, which means left analog up right here, left analog left. Now it's gonna say right analog up, right analog left. Excuse me, I'm doing this with one hand. Then left trigger,
right trigger and then left stick press, right stick press, and then we're going to assign select as the hotkey, and then hit OK. So now we could also use this. Okay, so that is how you map. Okay, so the very next thing you're gonna have to learn is that you might run into an issue. I'm gonna turn the volume down. So you might run into an issue where the audio is not playing. If that is the case, don't freak out. You just hit start. You go down to system settings. Don't go to sound settings. Go to system settings. We're gonna hit the action button, and we're gonna scroll down to audio profile. Okay. Now you want to select something that looks like that or something with an HDMI. So sometimes audio or stereo won't work. So find something with an HDMI because we have an HDMI connection. Okay, so that's typically how it's done. And then you could hit back. Then you pretty much go up to sound settings and enter that. Okay, and then you can control sound from here, right? So I leave it at 100%. And that should automatically give you audio if you weren't having audio. So that's the audio issue. Okay, so now that we got the controllers mapped and the audio issue, which is rare, but you may run into that audio issue, that's what you do to fix it. It's super easy. Okay, so now you need to understand how this works. You have a bunch of folders, right? And it comes with thousands of games. As you can see, it says right there. So you have the all games folder, which is where it starts. You have a favorites folder, which we haven't added any favorites to yet. Then we have light gun games. You could select that by hitting the action button and going down and seeing all the light gun shooter games. You could plug in a Sinden light gun and this will be plug and play. Everything is configured. You won't need any sensors around the monitor either. You won't need any of that, any of those infrared sensors or nothing like that. Once you plug in the Sinden light gun into the Raspberry Pi via USB, you're gonna get a thin white border around the perimeter only when you enter a shooter game. And that thin white line is what the gun determines how, like exactly where you're aiming. So you won't need any sensors. It's actually very accurate and works very good. You have a great collection of games here, by the way. You got Duck Hunt and House of the Dead 2 and Time Crisis. So that works great. Then you have a bunch of different consoles. So you have Ataris and Commodores and some things you've never heard of. Nintendo and Game Boy and Super Nintendo and Virtual Boy and N64 and Game Boy Color. So this is what it looks like. So you got the Genesis games. I mean, they're all there. Sega CD, Dreamcast, Neo Geo, Neo Pocket Color, PlayStation 1, PSP. And you have a folder specific to 4-player games if you want to play 4-player games. So there's 3 main folders I do want to highlight. So that would be the main. Main is the original arcade version of a game. Okay, so if you're playing Pac-Man or Burger Time or Galaga, you want to be here. You don't want to play the Nintendo version or whatever other version that they may have. Okay, so arcade games, I like to stick with main. And I'll show you how that works. So the reason why you have to add an extra button right here is for the following reason. A, you need to select, and B, it's also for main games. And I'll explain that. So that is your hotkey. The select button is your hotkey for player 1, and then you have one for player 2. So let's just say if we were to search, we're gonna hit the search button. We go to Pac-Man by hitting P, A, C, and we could hit start, and anything with the word PAC will show up. So we'll go to Miss Pac-Man, and we select that. And this, by the way, does save high scores too. So it's another good feature about this whole setup. So it's going to give you the original ROM. It gave you that the numbers, just like the original arcade did. Okay, and then now you cannot play the game no matter what you do. So that's why we add this extra button. That is the same as putting a credit or a token or a coin in the arcade. So once I hit that, you get a credit. So now you could play MAME games. So that is necessary for all MAME games. Okay, and then you could play Pac-Man as intended. Okay, so to get out of a game, you got to hit start and select at the same time. I can't even reach it with one hand. So I'll put this down. So you hit start and select one time simultaneously. That kicks you right back out. So now I'm still in a filter where it only shows me games with the word PAC. So I go back and I hit search, and now I go back to reset, select that, now I could go back. Okay, so MAME is the original arcade games. The second of the third folders I want to show you are Final Burn Neo. Now these are also arcade games, but in a very specific genre. So you got like the X-Men's and the Street Fighters and the Punishers, the Marvel vs. Capcoms. You'll find the arcade versions here, and they actually play very well. So you have, you know, the Street Fighter 0, 2, Alpha, Alpha 3, Street Fighter Champion Edition, Street Fighter Hyper Edition. You know, just you'll get all the good stuff here. Marvel superheroes. You'll find this genre, and these are the arcade version. So once again, you will have to use coin to add credit for these games. These are the games you want to play on an arcade system. I personally don't want to play, Street Fighter 2 on Sega Genesis version. I'd rather play it on the arcade version. So let's just go back. The third and final one would be Neo Geo. So those are also arcade version games. And everything else will be pretty normal. I might have passed it up. So Neo Geo would be right there. You select that, and these are also, Art of Fightings. You get some really good bangers here, guys. You got the Metal Slug 1 through 6. Look at this collection of games. These are also arcade versions. So I kind of gravitate always towards arcade versions of games. And then you have normal folders like Dreamcast. You can select Dreamcast and play other games in different consoles like this. You could also go to Genesis, play all these different games. But that's how it works. It is a little frustrating to understand the first 5 to 10 minutes, the button layout and how it works. But don't freak out, right? If you hit something wrong like that, don't worry about it. Just hit the back button. Nothing bad will happen, okay? So you could N64, play your N64 games. It doesn't matter. You could play with the controller or with the joystick. A lot of that is going to be dependent on what game you have and what game you're playing. Some games, like a racing game, I might not want to play on this. I would rather play on a controller because it's easier. But if I'm playing like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I would rather play on this. So you would have to make your decision. So if you're playing NFL Blitz or things of that nature, you will have to make a decision on whether to play with the joysticks or whether to play with the arcade. The only other thing is you can't upgrade to a Raspberry Pi 5 or a mini PC. Pretty much everything plays good on Raspberry Pi 4, with the exception of Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct demands a lot. So there's the arcade version of Killer Instinct 1 and Killer Instinct 2. So it's kind of glitchy on the Pi 4, but on the Pi 5, it plays perfect. Everything else that I've seen on Pi 4 plays wonderful. So no issues there, guys. That's how it works. That's how you operate it. Once again, to recap, that's your enter or action button for everything in the main menu. That's to go back, and that's to search. Okay, search. If I hit the search button, I could search the entire library. But if I want to search a specific console, I enter the console like Nintendo right there, and then I could hit search. Now I'm only searching for Nintendo. So that's just some things you need to know. Start and select, which is also your hotkey right there. Okay, so that's how it works. It's a wonderful layout. It works really good. It's got a great collection, and you have the option of a Pi 4, a Pi 5, or a mini PC. Okay, guys, so I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope this helps.